Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Today is April 17th, 2018. I'm Roy Potter, and welcome to a live stream version of the Potter Expositor. I do a lot of these when I post now. It's kind of nice for the interaction, and looks like I'm going to have some problems with the connection. Just be aware that it's snowing here, and every time it snows, the internet has problems, which has problems anyway. I thought I would do this in a more relaxed environment today, more casual. Try to make it so that it's not as formal, I guess, under the circumstances. As most of you can see, the chat room is on, so you can go ahead and start your communications if you like. Again, this is probably as much of an experiment as anything else. I want to see how this setup works. I've had to change back to my old mic because the new one, which is a desk mic, is way too heavy for this boom that the mic is mounted on. So at any rate, we'll see how that works. I just hope it doesn't overmodulate and that you can hear me fine. Maybe you can let me know. And I hate to start off that way. One of these days I'll have some moderators, I suppose. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for coming. And you know, like I say, this is kind of an experiment, as well as just to kind of do a more relaxing discussion. So it sounds great. Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate it. Appreciate it very much. Well, no, I'm still not happy about Syria. Might as well get that out of the way. I've seen a lot of excuses, a lot of threads on Twitter explaining, you know, the connections between the supposed areas that were bombed. Well, we know that there were 3 locations for certain. However, you look at the footage from some of the cameras that people had of the attack, and there are more places being bombed than 3, and I realize some of them can be very large, but I think more was going on there. But at any rate, I've seen a lot of things about this being an attack on a deep state, kind of like the bombings of the CIA drug labs in Afghanistan that we found out about. And I don't want to get wrapped around the axle on those things, because one of the situations that you run into is that the rich elites are members of boards of businesses all over the world. And more frequent than not, you'll find them somewhere on a board in a business, if for no other reason than because they have a large investment in it, no matter what it is. And a lot of people are saying, well, these people had investments in these chemical labs. Well, first of all, there's still no proof that those were chemical weapons labs. Could have been something else entirely, and I'm not prepared to say what. But I just want to caution everybody that it's really past time to be in a cult of personality. We really have to get away from that. We should be grown-ups on that now. You know, I've been warning all along, for how many years, that, again, the intelligence community is our most dangerous domestic enemy. Even President Trump, when he was running for office, not so much afterwards, but when he was running for office, admitted that the IC had gotten us into these conflicts around the world, particularly in the Middle East, and that we've gotten sucked in there and we can't get out. Well, we could get out. It's just that it makes too much money for the military-industrial complex and keeps the area in an uproar so that they can conduct the business of the New World Order, which they are a part of. And we've discussed that before. I think that if we're going to look at things in a serious manner, we have to be honest, like I said a few minutes ago, and not just go along with our guy because it's our guy. If we do that, we're no better than the Obama crowd. We're no better than the Bush crowd. And I know there are a lot of people here with a lot of differing opinions, but it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, or what you think things should be. The fact of the matter is that anyone in power should be looked at with suspicion. When I did my last live stream, I said, I feel like exposing all of the hypocrisy that I've seen from Trump. And it's not just, I'm sorry, but it's not just politics and having to bend to the will of the Congress or of the other influences in D.C. Some of these things have been evident for a long time. What I had hoped was that he had come to a realization, as he seemed to indicate, that he understood the nuances and the influences that have turned our world into really a hell on earth. Now, there are a lot of good things here, and I realize that. And I'd like to talk about the good things, and there are. Family, children, loved ones. Even our technology, the things that we have that make life more interesting, our ability to communicate. But when anything can be used for evil, it's going to be. It always will be. And that includes men with good intentions. It isn't of small coincidence that Trump made this turn on Syria after the Michael Cohen raid. Now, no one expects President Trump to be a goody two-shoes, but we do know that he was a man of the world, and that's okay. Everyone progresses at their own rate. And as you know, I don't hold, all these sexual things as being part of something that you need to charge or accuse people of. A lot of that gets worked out under the right circumstances. And sometimes it just takes time for the right circumstances to show up. I'm not saying that what's in the hands of the FBI and the Mueller team have anything to do with sex, but obviously there's something there, because Trump did change. Now, a lot of people say this is part of the plan, trust Sessions, which by now everybody should know that's not the case. And et cetera, et cetera. But if there was a plan, this was a deviation from it. And it was done. General Mattis was apparently, I thought it might be a diversion, but apparently he really did feel that it was inappropriate for the action at this time. And that apparently, and I can't verify this right now, other than that it's been in a couple of articles, True Pundits one, and there were some others, and we kind of heard about this early on, but that Trump may have wanted to bomb even the Russians and the Syrians directly. Now, again, I don't have any evidence of that, and the only reason why I bring it up is because if it turns out to be true, and I don't know if we'll find that out yet, but if it turns out to be true, then something more has happened. And it's possible that Trump is off the rails. Now, that doesn't surprise anybody because of my position, but we really, I have this good friend in California who's behind Trump 100%. He criticizes him when he does stupid stuff, things like that. But the Syria thing is so serious. That sounds funny. Syria is serious. That the cult of personality, we cannot partake of that in this. We cannot. As I've said before, a lot of people are looking at this as an Armageddon, and the Christians, a lot of the born again Armageddon, loving Christians, and then the same thing on the Islamic side and the same thing on the Jewish side. All three of those religions are into this last days big Armageddon thing. My view of Armageddon from the scriptures is not the same as the destruction of all of humanity that these religions on the Orthodox side, well, not the Orthodox side, but on the extremist side. I hate that word, but that's just about the only way to do it. Glorifying the destruction of the physical bodies of mankind. And that doesn't make any sense if you believe in the resurrection, unless you think the resurrection wasn't a bodily resurrection. But I think we, as I've talked about with the Shroud of Turin, that's pretty much, the way I look at it. I don't force anybody else to, but I don't look at this existence as being something nasty and bad, despite the interpretations of people who would have it that way for whatever reason. And the only reason why I bring all of this up is because of the destructive influences of these philosophies. And that we have two paths, and I've mentioned this before, so this is kind of a rehash of this. The information in the scriptures, just say Holy Writ, okay, and that'll take you in a lot of different things. The implications in the Holy Writ is that you have paths that you can take. And a good example of that is the situation that happened in the city of Nineveh when Jonah was told to go and tell them. Apparently in this story, God tells Jonah to go tell Nineveh if they don't repent, they're going to be destroyed. And he only did that after, he was convinced to, because, God was going to punish him if he didn't give this message. So Jonah didn't even want to do it. But then he goes out and he makes this effort and he tells the people they're going to be destroyed unless they repent. And he figures they're not going to repent. And they've treated him fairly badly and all of that. But the fact of the matter is they do repent. And God doesn't destroy them. And then Jonah gets mad because he feels like God let him down. Do you see this story? God gives you two paths. The destruction of Armageddon can probably be as the exterminating, annihilating type of thing that a lot of these extremist religions talk about. That could be one path. Or the other path could be it's the destruction of the wicked. And I'm going to go a little further than that, the evil. And that's how I look at it. I don't believe that God has any intention of destroying his entire creation and turning it back into some spirit realm only, some ethereal, out-of-body, non-corporeal existence, because that then would make none of this of any worth or sense. When I was doing my spiritual training, and a lot of you know, I did take Kabbalah, and a lot of people think that's a bad word. You'll see how all this ties in here in a minute with Trump. Kabbalah is like anything else. There's a good side and a bad side. As a matter of fact, if you look at really well-done images of the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, etc., it's a mirror image. You have one above and one below. And everybody goes, oh, that's Luciferian, that's Luciferian. Well, but didn't Jesus say in his prayer that God's will would come on earth as it is in heaven? So, the principle is right. It's how it's used and how it's interpreted that makes the difference. So, during this study that I did of ancient Jewish mysticism, Jewish is the wrong, I'm going to say Israelite mysticism, even that of pre-Israelite, going back to Abraham and even to Shem, possibly even back to Adam. The earlier meditative, contemplative mysticism was a thing, and I've talked about it before, called Hekkelot. And Hekkelot means chambers, and Jesus talked about, in my Father's house are many mansions, and mansions is another name for chambers, and I've talked about this before. Well, during all of that study, in other words, the Hekkelot, let me explain that again. The Hekkelot is using the sacred names of God, not just the letters in the Hebrew alphabet, but the sacred names, and doing some other rituals in order to ascend through the various degrees of heaven, so that eventually, if you do it right, you can actually come before the throne of glory on what's called a Merkava, which Ezekiel talks about, the fiery chariot. All of that is symbol in one way, but it's real in another. And I won't talk about the significance between sex and the ecstasy of of a sage who enters into those realms, but it's similar. So that's why it's called ecstasy, is because it's very much akin to the feeling that God gives us. It's supposed to be used for love and fusion and all that when we make love to our loved ones. But of course that's been perverted by what you would call Satan, like everything else. But in these studies that I did, there was always this underlying theme that God doesn't care about your body, and there's a quote in Jeremiah that is used to kind of justify that. And what I would say about it is this, and that was even in these classes. It's the disdain for the physical creation. And I'm going to say this here, maybe I shouldn't, but we do have a seed in us, that part of our DNA, that was infused by an outsider. And these UFO people and all of that, they're really not far off. I see Jordan Sather taking hits by people all the time because of his take on UFOs and all that. And I'm not saying at all extraterrestrials are good like Stephen Greer does, or all are bad like others say, or that an extraterrestrial could just be from these interdimensional things that we're finding out about. And you have to give some scientific credence for that, because these dimensions exist, and CERN, of course, is trying to break through that. Well, I'm going through all this to say that we do have a part of our DNA that has to be purged from us, and it's because it's been infiltrated by this outside influence, and it's talked about right there in Genesis. This outside influence that causes us to do maybe things that aren't in our best interest or in the interest of other members of mankind. And that is going to be gotten rid of, and that's why death was introduced into the world. Not to get rid of the physical existence, but to get rid of the bad DNA and then to raise it again without it. That's my take on it, and I got that because of all the things that I've studied for a very long period of time. The individual soul isn't complete until the spirit and that physical body is reunited, and that's what's called the human soul. The spirit and the body are the soul of man. God breathed his spirit into the flesh of Adam, and he became a living soul. So these people that preach this entire annihilation of the physical universe, and I've heard all the arguments about, the breakdown of the atoms and all this, and everything's going to come to a stop and all that. But see, that's the entropy side that doesn't make sense when you compare it to the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution says that by some unknown reason, just happenstance, things have progressed the way they are, from the more simple to the more complex. But as I said to my zoology teacher, I think it was zoology, in college, that is in direct contradiction to the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, which I've talked about before, which tends to break down. So in other words, what we see in the universe is an outside, is a force, is a will, is an intelligence, or I'll say a will to existence that is out there, that puts in this extra energy to keep things from totally falling apart until it can be brought into a state of eternity like that. And that was the symbol of the resurrection, in my opinion, that's where we're going. And so any desire to destroy this or to go along with its destruction is in fact Luciferian. And so I'm very, very cautious with people that preach that. But we have these forces at work, and the New World Order, and I'm not going to define that. A lot of people say, well, name them. Well, we should know that by now, so I'm not going to waste that time. But they're out there, and they're doing some really horrible things to try to get that path of total annihilation to occur, which probably won't be brought on us by God, but by, of course, these evil forces, because God will withdraw his spirit, which is important to understand why we need, and this is where I'm going with this with Trump, why we need to hold fast to that which is good and totally reject that which is evil. If God needs that, well, God doesn't need anything. Certainly, well, he does need us. Actually, he does. It's more than he wants us. He really does need us. But that's a subject for another philosophy class some other day. We need to take this spirit that's being poured out right now. There's a great awakening, and everybody knows about that saying now. There's this great awakening, this great realization. And the evil forces are trying to stop that. They want us to go the other way. So, a lot of us, when we looked at Trump, we saw him saying things similar. Didn't expect him to be perfect. Still don't. But there were certain parameters upon which we expected him to conduct himself. And bending over to the military-industrial complex is not one of them. And people will say, well, that's not what he's doing. He's using the military and the military complex to go after the deep staters in Syria. And all I'll say about that is this. If he was really going after the deep staters in Syria, do you think he'd be getting applauded for the attacks by people like Clinton or by any of that whole group of people? And he is. Now he's getting you got to be. I don't have to be careful how I say it. The media is giving him a bad time about it, but they give him a bad time about anything. They're saying he's doing it because he's trying to take pressure, information off of the whole Stormy Daniels thing and all that. I wouldn't deny that could have now become part of his reason. Zero Hedge did a story, if any of you saw it earlier this week or late last week or maybe over the weekend, of 6 reasons why Trump attacked Syria, and one of those was to take to change the media lines, to change the storylines to something else. Very possible. I wouldn't discount that. But regardless of what his reasoning was, it wasn't to go after deep state targets. I am not convinced of that, even though there are people who say, well, look who's on the boards of these different businesses. Like I said, people are parts of boards no matter what. In World War II, for instance, quite the opposite. There were members of boards from, say, even on Winston Churchill, he owned or partially owned businesses in Germany, as did London and New York bankers, and those factories were off limits to bombing. Okay, now you might say, well, that's this proof that Trump went after them this time. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. The Russians are our barometer in this entire thing, how they react, because they're not going to be stupid enough to realize that they let CIA and deep state activities inside of these rebel-held zones without taking them out themselves. Okay? There's no way. The Russians were allowing the Syrians to go into, and they had surrounded Douma, and were ready to. A lot of people are saying, well, why didn't Assad take out, if those were chemical, they're saying they were chemical facilities. If they were chemical facilities, why didn't Assad take them out long ago? Well, let's go back even further. Why did John Kerry say that all the chemical weapons were out of Syria? Look, you can't blame just Assad and you can't blame just the Russians. This is a lot worse than all of that. Okay? It goes deeper than that. So what's happened here, in my estimation, is that when Trump gets off into these other areas where he talked about it earlier that he wouldn't do these things, it needs to be cause for concern for us. And I could list a whole number of things. I'll just do a couple. And I said this before, the bump stock deal. Why hasn't he gone to protect us in the First Amendment assault by Yahoo, by by YouTube, Twitter, etc. Mark Zuckerberg. Now, wow, okay, he's testifying before Congress. Well, that was a joke, really, if you understand what was going on there. Some good things came out, but a lot of them, they didn't have the guts to ask the questions. And Lionel of Lionel Nation talked about that. He was really disappointed in how the Congress conducted that hearing. It didn't get to the hard questions. So the First Amendment problems, the Second Amendment problems, the fact that many Trump supporters were injured or slandered or hurt in very serious ways, federal government interventions, opening up investigations, allowing the SPLC and Media Matters and some of these other, like George Washington University, I guess it is. Where is it, Georgetown? I guess it's Georgetown. On these different people that are out there trying to reveal the truth. All of this happening. Now Trump, as I said once before, can't go after all of that. I realize it. You know, the general has to look at the entire battlefield, and he can't be over here helping this commander doing whatever he's doing and avoid the big picture. Now, I realize that. But by the same token, sorry, I'm going to get rid of something here I don't want to see. Okay. But that's why you have subordinate assistant commanders to take care of those things. And unfortunately, Jeff Sessions has not done that, and neither has anybody else that we've been able to see. So all I'm saying is that we can't be a part of this cult of personality. We have got to hold them to the letter of what they said. Give them some leeway to operate, yes, but the Syria thing is very, very serious. And if it continues, as Nikki Haley has said, that they're going to continue bombing, and the Russians respond, this is not going to go well. I don't think Vladimir Putin has any inside information from Trump that this is all just a ploy. Look, the IC and the deep state, you know, we keep hearing Trump saying, or Q saying, we hear you, we see you, we know what you're doing, you're stupid, you're sick. You don't think the IC is doing the same thing in the opposite direction? If you don't think that, you're really naive. So there's no way that Trump and Putin have had any secret communications that the IC and the deep state don't know about. That's just a fact. Trump looks like a damaged, he looks like a wounded soldier right now. Frankly, the federal judge, who was obviously a plant by Clinton, who was going to be her AG, just ruled against Trump on this whole thing with attorney-client privilege. And I'm not going to get into an argument about, you know, well, yeah, lawyers can be raided if they're involved in criminal conduct. Of course they can. But the FBI seized everything, and then they were going through it to decide what they were going to use and what they wouldn't. In other words, they got to decide, and that's just not the way it works. So there are some serious problems there. But the bottom line on this is that it's obvious that Trump has something in his background that he considers destructive enough that he's willing to forego repentance. And part of repentance is just being open and honest about it. That's why I say he's becoming more like Saul. Saul was anointed by God. Samuel the prophet anointed him to be the king, anointed by God in these archetypal tales, and agreed to do certain things that God required of him. But then became jealous of his position, worried about losing his kingship more than doing what was right. And that's when he turned. So I've said that Trump is on, again, a pathway that divides. He can become like Cyrus, like a lot of people have said he's supposed to be the Cyrus of Persia, who helps the Israelites get back their lands, prosper, return to their God, etc. Or he can be like Saul, who is already part of God's people, but chooses not to follow because he's too prideful and he's too worried about his position that really isn't his anyway. presidency doesn't belong to any one person. There's an executive that's placed in there to conduct it, but the office of the presidency is actually separate from the person that's doing it, if you understand what I'm saying. And that's why military officers, for instance, they respect the presidency, but maybe not necessarily the president. Which opens up another issue. A lot of these military people, retired or otherwise, who aren't critical of Trump. I mean, they are to a certain extent, but they don't go too far. For instance, I'm not going to name any names, but saying that Intel is kind of backing up what Trump said. I don't believe that for a moment, not under the circumstances. But if they say it in any other way, they risk losing their retirement. They risk losing, being brought in on insubordination charges or any number of other things under anything from non-judicial punishment, Article 15, all the way through courts-martial. So any active duty or people that are receiving a retirement check are still considered part of the service and are subject to the UCMJ, and they're not going to publicly say anything that criticizes the president to any great degree. Well, that's probably about as much as I want to say to that. Trump is the one that has to prove to us. Keep this in mind. Trump has to prove to us. All this nonsense of trying to fool the deep state and the CIA and the New World Order and all of that is nonsense. It's absolute 100% nonsense. Okay? He just needs to repent. Admit whatever he did that he shouldn't have done, and I have a suspicion about one of those things, and it's bad if I'm right, and I'm not saying I am, but if I am right about it, it is devastating, and it could destroy him. But better him than the entire republic. I don't listen much to the Zach character who comes on to InfoWars. In passing, he seems to have a lot of good information, and I did go back and I listened to his discussion with Alex Jones the morning after, or maybe it was in the evening. I guess it was in the evening, during and right after the attacks in Syria, and he said something that well, he said a lot of good things, I think. But he sensed that there had been a turn in direction in Trump. And he went through a number of reasons, which I won't repeat here, but he talked about that. And one of the examples he gave of if these things that Mueller found out about him, that they're going to leak over the next few months, or maybe even used to impeach him under the 25th Amendment. One of the examples that Zach used, which was absolutely perfect, was a rail car careening down a hill out of control. And that you have three people on if you turn the lever so that you go to the right, you'll hit three people. You know you're going to hit three people. But if you allow it to keep going down the tracks, you're going to kill hundreds of people. What do you do? In high school, I remember having a class where, and some of you may have had this as well, that you're on a lifeboat in the ocean and that there's only enough food for three people, but for 2 days, but you've got 6 people in there. What do you do? Now that was a mind game that they placed on people in those days to get them ready for this entire disgusting eugenics program and democide and homicide and eradication, culling of human beings under false pretenses. But the trolley situation really does apply, and this is how. If Trump was worried about what this information would do to his family, even including assassinations, if he didn't go along, is he really going to sacrifice If he's coming down in that trolley car, and he can either decide to take out the hundreds of people that are in front of him, or he can pull the lever and go to the left and take out his family. Not an easy decision. Not one I would want to be in. But morally, what's the answer? Well, that's the situation we're in. If Trump, like all the other leaders who have been, well, most of them were part of the cabal anyway, and I'll admit that he is not. But if he is willing to sacrifice us, our families, and millions of people, thousands and millions, possibly billions of people, rather than accept the responsibility of his own actions, even if it endangers his family, is that moral? I understand it, but I think the point is made. That's part of God's expectation of Trump. He made the promise, and God gave him the most powerful position in the known world. And I say the known world because of the shadow governments and the powers that be behind. But God gave him that position through God using us to put him there. And he is not abiding by his covenant. I don't care how you slice it, how you try to justify it. We're seeing some things right now. There's this, and I'm not going to say much about it, but there's this supposed videotape or video of certain people, I won't even name them, that's now out on the dark web, and it's going to be revealed in the Wiener laptop and all that stuff. I don't know about that, but I will say this. Be damned the gentle disclosure of all this information under some pretense, some concern that it'll cause chaos and difficulty in the population. It is time, if these things are true, if the New York Police Department, the DOJ and the FBI are trying to cover it up, and I'm going to mention a few things about that here in a minute. They're still trying to cover it up. But if these things are true, and Trump has access to that information, he needs to let it rip. Because we're at a point now where these things really do have to be revealed. Sergeant Report put out a great video again this last day or so about these child traffickers and organ harvesters that go where these wars are, and they get children and women, and probably men too, but it's mostly children and women, and take their organs and kill them. Take that life so that they can sell to supposedly save the life of these rather rich people. How horrible. And he didn't show the entire video. He only showed a minute of it, but those things exist. We've seen it in Planned Parenthood. Same thing. And no doubt it happens a lot more often than we're willing to admit. You can't stop these things by playing patty cake with them. And I've called for at least a year now that Trump needs to go on the offensive and go after these people with a vengeance. And his reticence to do so under some pretense of a plan that's being followed that's not doing anybody any good, especially the victims, is hypocrisy. They're going to go after him anyway. No matter what he does, they're going to attack them. Even Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer said that. No matter what he does, they're going to criticize him. They're going to go after him. So why not be criticized for doing the thing that will set this ship aright as soon as possible? Because the longer it lists and the further it gets into the water as it's sinking, the more difficult it is to save it, to bail it out, and to right it. And we're not recovering the way we need to. A lot of people say the economy's coming back. How many of you have actually seen evidence of that? I look around where I am. I go to some of these bigger cities, and I'm looking at still, even today, the stores and the businesses that are closing their doors. It's still happening. Entire areas are shut down. And more are shutting down. I used to be in the show business. Show meaning, you go to fairs and to home shows where they show home improvement things and all that. And I used to do marketing sales there to first of all, to sell new products, but also to find out how they sell and what the demographics are, and sometimes just to sell. But we noticed that those were places where people with discretionary income go to have a good time, sort of like Disneyland, that kind of thing. And we've noticed a steady decrease in the attendance and in the amount of money spent at those shows. I haven't done it for a few years now, a couple years, but it's still headed in that direction. It's still going downhill. Okay, you can blame the internet to some extent, but not entirely. So things aren't as rosy as they're made to appear. Are the employment numbers being jockeyed with? Well, they could do it without even Trump knowing about it. Why would they do that? Because when the fall happens, guess who gets the blame? Why didn't you tell us the truth? Why did you pretend like these numbers were better than you said they were? You get the point? Okay. In other words, Trump needs to come clean. No matter how it might injure him, the king takes that hit for his people. And I call him a king because it's a metaphor, okay? Although Don Henley used to say, he had that song about the king, that we elected a king. Just a few points, and I'm sure most of you know this. Millions of dollars in a slush fund for Congress to pay off sexual predations by different members of Congress to keep it hidden. Why aren't those people being charged? I don't care if they've paid somebody off or not. That's something that they can be charged criminally with. Conspiracy to hide criminal conduct. We need to hold our public leaders to a higher expectation. And unfortunately, it's not that way, like it is with a lot of things. Yet these same people that have paid off, different individuals that they've sexually assaulted or taken advantage of, just like I say, the guilty accuse you of what they're guilty of. And so we have to come to Trump's defense on that other than this one thing I'm worried about, anything that Trump has done with adult women in the past, and I'm not saying he did anything with children, I'm not saying that. I'm just clarifying that those things are not in the purview of his ability to govern. They don't interrupt that, other than the perceptions of the people, which is a factor, but it shouldn't be of such a nature that it prevents him from doing what's right, is what I'm saying. And I can defend him on that if he ever wants me to. I can give him that defense. We saw it in David in the Old Testament. Most of you know that the UN Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is now conducting their inspection. What is Trump going to do when they find out that there was no release there, or that Assad didn't do it? Will he go along with the New World Order and the military-industrial complex and go against this? This is a real trial for Trump. If he doesn't come through this, he will have turned completely, is my estimation. On April 14th, True Pundit made a report that there were 3,600 or so troops, U.S. troops in Jordan for a 2-week exercise. It's called, I can't even read my own, Eager Lion, I guess, something like that. These are normal training exercises. Nothing necessarily to get excited about, other than to say that under the tensions that we have now, exercises are always a cover for an actual military operation that can be kicked off. That's why they do exercises, pre-positioning of equipment and all that, and they can use it to then conduct a real invasion. So they're continuing with this, so it's something to keep an eye on. I don't think the Russians are going to let this last episode go without another answer from them. Certainly if Nikki Haley and others get their way and they make another attack on Syria, Russia will not stand down. I'm surprised. They used a lot of restraint this last time, but they've sent out their warnings now, and they're sending military equipment to the area. And this type of training exercise in Jordan is obviously something that they're watching. Y'all should also know that the excuse that Theresa May used to accuse the Russians of poisoning a double agent, the Skripals, has now been identified not as Novichok or any kind of nerve agent. It was a BZ, it's called a BZ toxin. And it's something that the US, UK, and NATO use, not Russia. And they're trying to keep that quiet, but I'm hoping it's getting out there. I'm just going to mention in passing here, and I know I'm rambling quite a bit. It's kind of like I said, I wanted this to be a relaxed atmosphere this time, so that we can just talk about a few things. And I'm going to go to the chat here in just a minute. American intelligence media has put out a series, I think it's a 7-part series, on the conspiracy, I would probably go ahead and label it as that, of causing the nuclear program to follow uranium rather than thorium. Why is that important? Well, because in thorium plants, and there was a problem in a Simi Valley accident in 1959 using the sodium-based cooling system, which could have been sabotaged. I'm not really sure at this point, but I think they don't mention this as happening, but I'm aware of it because it's what probably killed my wife. Because she was in Simi Valley, not at the time, but it still has problems today from this accident that occurred in 1959, and not telling anybody that it happened. But this particular plant was using thorium, probably sabotaged to get as part of this, and I might be a little off on that, but you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. It was to get us out of using thorium and go after uranium instead. And why uranium? Because you can do weapons, use these facilities to then get weapons grade uranium to refine it, where that doesn't work with thorium. So here we have another example of what the powers that be did to try to guarantee that they could destroy whom they will, to swallow whom they will, to have power over whom they will, even threatening all of creation here on earth with it, when we could have had a clean energy source. Now there'll be people that will argue that because the institutions and getting your doctorate degrees and your studies are all dependent upon federal grants where you have to say and do certain things. And so a lot of the truth of these things, even if you know about them, you can't talk about them if you work for them, because you'll lose your job or you won't get any funding, no more grants, etc. But this was an excellent series, and you should probably go watch it. And it points out that Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged and a lot of other works, she was a conservative who commented on liberties and things like that, but that this series especially may have of hers may have actually been telling the underlying story of the atomic energy program. And a lot of people, where's John Galt, right? That's part of the thing with Atlas Shrugged. Where's John Galt? Well, Galt stands for geothermal atmospheric liquefied thorium, and showing that this Galt thing was veered off and disposed of, and that's the hidden message in these Ayn Rand books. So go look at that series. It's a little difficult to see. There's so much information packed into the screen that you have to stop it and read it, and you have to let it think, kind of percolate and think on it before you really understand where it's going. But it's an excellent series. I don't know the agent that did that or who actually did the study, the research, but whoever it was and put that together, it's really amazing, and it really does tell you a lot that you need to know about as far as why we are in so much danger today from these nuclear programs like Fukushima melting down, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, etc., etc., Simi Valley. Of course, again, that was thorium, well, not thorium, but the salt coolant. So I don't know the whole story on that. I'd have to look at it, but it's interesting that was kept quiet. Okay, the last thing I'll do here is bring up the True Pundit article that came out, I believe, this morning. It's called Huge Major Scandal Uncovered. It's a story and includes some information of Tracy Bean's earlier and current breakdown of what the possibilities are that have happened with McCabe, etc. And we've all been waiting for the OIG report to come out. And it finally did, of course. And she went through it and and this story in True Pundit talks about some of her explanations. And basically what I'll say about it is this, is that nothing in the OIG report on this subject is anything we didn't already either know or have a high reason to suspect. We were talking about these issues late last summer, into the fall, certainly before the OIG report came out. So there's nothing really in there that's surprising, except the things that aren't mentioned. And that sometimes the things that aren't mentioned are more important than the things that are. But it merely substantiates the story in True Pundit and the OIG report, merely substantiate what the leaks were back then, the information that was coming out, and the research of independent journalists like us that we already knew about as early as 2016 to some extent, and then put the puzzle together, and it's pretty much been substantiated now when the OIG report came out. But what I'm saying was, as far as it not mentioning, it doesn't bring out any information on the Wiener laptop, but it insinuates that that's what the conversation was between Comey, Loretta Lynch, McCabe, etc., and that the entire thing was to cover up the incident so that Clinton would be protected. It's still vague. They do, and that's my point in talking about this. They're still protecting Hillary Clinton. I swear she must be Lucifer's consort. It's the only reason why this would continue. All right. We've been going for almost an hour now. Let me look at the chat here. Oh, yeah. John Smith says, it's cold and snowing this morning. Still no power since Saturday night. Yeah, the windstorm here was really, really bad. We lost power, too. And it's snowing where I am. Yeah, David Steele, you're right. The ordering of the bombing of Iraq during the impeachment proceedings against Clinton, another example of how these things work, and it's wrong. If Trump did that, he better repent, because he's going to be taken out, not by us. God will take care of it, because he's not going to put up with. God won't be mocked with stuff like this. He just won't. Twitter has been taken offline. Interesting. When did that happen, George Winsper? Let me look at that. Just take a look and see what you're talking about. And that's another thing. You got to watch these when they turn off social media or the internet or whatever. That's an indication that something's coming. Now mine's still working apparently. Let me double check here and see. Yeah, I think mine's still up. So it might just be where you are, and that can happen. Twitter down across the world? Not here. Not here. Let me double check again. Let me send a tweet out and see what happens. Just a test. Nope. Still working here. I don't know. Maybe they've shut off certain areas because they're about ready to do something. I don't know. John Smith, something technically wrong. It says when you send at tweet. Really? Okay, I'll look at it again in a few minutes. Thanks for the information. Yeah, the only people that are being protected are, and who said this? Stardust. The only people that are being protected are the Democrats. I don't, why this reticence? So what if the people get upset that their Democratic leaders have been involved in these horrendous, heinous crimes, or Republicans, or anybody for that matter? We've got to stop this nonsense of trying to protect the status quo, and that's why I get upset at Trump. And he can't do this thing in Syria. He can't. And if he does, it's all lost. It's all lost. And we might as well all just get ready for the big bang that's going to be coming. Yeah, social media is counter intel collection. Absolutely. We all know that now. So that's what I mean. There's no protection for us. And Trump's done absolutely nothing about that. Now he hasn't had Sessions to help him, but that's what I mean. It's time to get off this pussyfooting around. The politics of the situation is out of the door now. We're at war. We've been at war, and the ship is sinking. And I don't care how good it looks, how rosy it looks, the ship is sinking. And if they don't fire back at the enemy and start making repairs, we're going to go down. That's just the way it is. Okay, hold on here. I got to see what this one was. Yeah, Elizabeth Luker. Every morning there are millions of patriots worldwide that pray for Trump and our country. I understand that, but don't you think people were praying for Saul, during the wars that they were in? It doesn't matter if the person that the prayer is going to doesn't accept God's direction. It doesn't matter how much you pray. It really doesn't. Do you understand that? That doesn't fix it. If the person doesn't accept God's Spirit, if they reject it because they think they know better, at the very least he's rejecting the base that put him in, which is the body of the Spirit that's trying to tell him which way to go, and he's rejecting it. He's listening to the hardliners, to the neocons. So no matter how much you pray for somebody like that, if they reject it, it's doing you good, it's helping you. But it's not going to fix the situation. Okay. Yeah, I'll bring that up. Somebody talked about the, I've done a lot of genealogical research in the Middle East, and that's why I know about Israel and, the Edomites and the Arabs and the Semites and the connections between Israel and Saudi Arabia and that kind of stuff. What Trump is doing in Syria, regardless of what he thinks he's doing, is he's endangering the Christians that are there. There's a worldwide war against Christians, and I'm just going to say it, I've said it in the past, against the white race. No, I'm not an Aryan or a white supremacist. It's just obvious. Look what's happening in South Africa. Look what's happening in Europe with and they even talk about it. You know, that I see it on Twitter and other places all the time about the diluting of the white race. You know, I see it all the time, which is a form of genocide. Natural selection, not really, not when it's forced by the powers that be. But Christians in particular are being attacked. Now, I'm not a traditional Christian, as most of you know, and I don't like Paul very much, as most of you should know by now, the Apostle Paul, supposedly. But he did say something that, you know, he was approached by people that said, hey, these people are talking about Jesus and they haven't got it right. And Paul said, you know, so what? All I care about is that Christ is preached. You know, they might make a little mistake here or there, but at least Christ is being preached. And so that's why I give a lot of leeway to Christians in general, because if they have the basic principles of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and love God first and thy neighbor and that kind of thing, I kind of let it go. Judge not that you be not judged, or at least render the judgment that you feel like you'd be willing to accept. But overall, Christianity is a good thing. And it is being attacked right now. And what Trump has done here is he's endangered. I mean, it's obvious that Syria, which is a secular, I mean, even though Assad, you know, we still have Islam there and Christianity. I don't know how many Jews are in Syria, but he has protected, Assad has protected the Christians and has been relentless in doing so. Is that murdering his opposition? Well, if their intent is to kill Christians, why is that bad? We never hear the other end of the story, why he's done what he's done to try to fend off this genocide against Christians. It's not really the right term, but you get my drift. This is evil, and we've got people in our government, in the military-industrial complex, the New World Order, the deep state, that even in our country have tried to subdue, criticize, put at a disadvantage Christians, even kill them. And I could go through a lot of that and explain it, but I think it should be prima facie to you. It should be manifestly understood that that's what's happened over the last few years. The way the Department of Defense talked about Christians as opposed to Islam. Islam being taught in our schools as cultural enrichments, but they won't do that for Christianity, etc. It's all there. It's all right in front of us. So if Assad was a monster against a certain group of people who were attacking Christians, maybe it was because he was defending them. We haven't been told the whole truth about Syria. There's a lady who's done some really good work, Eva Bartlett, something like that. And I'm sorry I don't remember her exact name, but you need to go look her up and see what she's saying. She's done studies on Syria for a long time, and it's obvious that we're being lied to. Syria Girl isn't wrong either. She's right. She's right on it. Okay. Sorry, you notice I am losing my voice. I hope the sound is still good. I don't know what the picture looks like. Let's take a look. I increased the bit rate. Remember the other morning I said I was going to do that? I increased the bit rate from... I had to get it really low to make it go. Like, it was like at 290 on the bit rate for the video. And so I've tried this new connection and I've raised it to 600. I'm hoping I can go higher than that to clear up the picture, but I see it's still jumping. Okay, so, but that might be due to the snow. I think that influences. So I'll probably do this on a day where it's nice and warm and sunny, and we'll see how that acts. Okay. I told you Frankie's asking, what the hell are you talking about? This is a relaxing discussion. That's why I don't have my map. I'm not at my desk. Okay? This is just kind of a discussion. It's just kind of going where we're going. So I'm answering some questions on the chat, like I'm answering your question right now, and we're just relaxing, okay? Because it's been really, really intense over the last little while. So we're just relaxing a little bit, okay, Frank? So relax. I'm not going to use neuro-linguistic programming and talk softly, but just relax. Yeah, Tameh al-Haq, Assad, Gaddafi, and Saddam all protected Christians. Yeah, they did. They were definitely secular governments. Unlike Saudi Arabia, they don't protect Christians. You know, no, they don't. And then there's this big thing between the Shiites and the Sunnis. And unfortunately, as things are progressing here, we're seeing that despite the fact that most real terrorists are from the Sunnis, and actually the biggest terrorists in the world are governments themselves. And I don't kid myself. I realize that. I'm not attacking Islam, other than the fact that I've studied it enough to know that there's some really bad things in there. But the real terrorists in the world are governments, no doubt about it. They use terrorism every day in one form or another, sometimes really bad ones, sometimes false flags using terrorists as cover. We all know that. But the fact of the matter is that the Sunnis are the bad. Or if you're gonna lump, if you're gonna look at Islam and divide it up, most people don't know enough to understand that there are these different sects in Islam, like there are in Christianity, for instance. The Sunnis are the ones where the Wahhabists come out of, and the really, really serious terrorists that are killing Christians in Syria, cutting heads off of little kids, grabbing them at the Turkish border, as Sean of Sergeant Report showed in that very excellent, again, the name of it is Huge Major Scandal. Oops, not the right one. Sorry. I've lost it. Anyway, he just put it out this morning or last night, showing how they take these little kids and harvest their organs, women too, probably some men, some soldiers, of course, but they like the younger people. Horrible stuff. So that's what they're doing to Christians and to their own people, but Christians are the number one target. Okay, here's, and I'll address this. Matt Freeman. Remember, you believed in Trump and believed in Q. Now you don't. Point is, your viewpoint is just that. Doesn't mean, yeah, I agree. I wouldn't argue with you, Matt Freeman, because things are fluid. That's one of the things I learned in the Army, dealing with intelligence and even in police work. A lot of times you have a hypothesis and you go with it until you disprove it. That's intellectual honesty, Mr. Freeman. In other words, I'm not a cult follower. When I see things done right, when I see that they're done correctly, I'll go along with it. I'm not going to follow it. I'm not going to follow it because it's the trendy thing to do. Okay? If you do that, if you follow something because it's trendy, or it makes you feel good, or you like the cult of personality, which is what you're talking. And in Q, the situation with Q, you don't even know who that is. That's a faceless person. You don't even understand all that. And I'm not going to go into it here because I really don't want to. I'm really done with that. But there are Twitter keys. There are social engineering appliances out of the UK that have been used along with this Q thing. And that's all I'll say about it. But you really don't know. You're worshiping it's not an AI, but you're coming close to that. You're worshiping the workmanship of men's hands. Okay? You go by principle, not by personality. So why do I shift? I give Trump the benefit of the doubt when it's necessary. But when I see him going off course, I'm not going to continue worshiping him. Don't worship him anyway, but you get the idea. That's the cult of personality. I will not do it. I will not do it. Q was good at first. We had a switch. And if you go to, let's say, Unirock is a good place to go. He talks about this. You can see this change from the first Q to what we have now. Now, he might still be slipping in there. We're not sure. But, there were too many things with the Q that I just decided it wasn't worth my time. And it's proven to be right. I could listen, you guys are like gamblers. You know, you only talk about the times where you make money. You never tell anybody the times that you lost money. And that's the deal with Q. You never talk about the time it's been wrong. You only talk about and it's not like somebody like me who's just commenting. They're supposed to be inside intelligence operatives that know what the hell's going on. Right with Trump, right? They got it right with Trump. Yet how many times have they been wrong? That doesn't make any sense. And it's been on some serious stuff, which I'm not going to go into here. If you don't know, you need to go study. But you've got cognitive dissonance. You've got normalcy bias. You're not going to get outside your little protected area here. So, yeah, I'm with Trump when he does it right. Does that mean when he makes a mistake, I'm going to abandon him? No. But going against the First Amendment, going against the Second Amendment, continuing with the construction of the police state, militarizing the police, going along with surveillance, causing wars, attacking Syria, all the things he told us he wasn't going to do, and it continues, you're damn right I'm going to call him out. And if you don't, you're intellectually dishonest, or you don't have an intellect. I am not a member of a cult of personality. I never will be. I'm not going to follow, you know, look at Hitler. He said a lot of wonderful things early on. And I'm not saying Trump is a Hitler. I'm not saying that. But if you look at the story on Hitler, it's the same thing. He even had people in the United States going along with what he was doing. And then when he started to go sideways, the intellectually dishonest wouldn't call him out on it because they were in the cult of personality. Mr. Freeman, I won't go there, and you probably ought to, if that's not your real name, Freeman, if that's one you've taken, you don't know anything about freedom if that's your outlook on things, that you'll support somebody even when they go off the rails. That's the type of thing that takes you to hell. Slowly. They're called the chains of hell. They drag you slowly so that you don't realize that they're taking you underneath. Because you look at them and you say, oh, it's the person I really have so much respect for. I can't possibly find any fault in them. I can't do it. It's like projection. You know, and Jordan Peterson talks about this. Dr. Jordan Peterson. You meet a girl, as an instance, or a guy. It could go either way. And you want this person to be what you want them to be. You project your image, your idol worship onto this person and don't see, because you don't want to, that they're not that person that you're projecting onto them, that they have faults, that they have shortcomings, that they have all these things. That's not a reason to break up. But if you're totally blind to it, it can be extremely dangerous. You know, I've even been guilty of that. When I was growing up, my mom, she was very much, insisted that men treat women right. And she said, little Roy, that's what she used to call him. Little Roy, remember, little boys are made out of nails, snails, and puppy dogs' tails, and little girls are made out of sugar and spice and all that's nice, and don't you ever forget it. Well, when I was 40 years old, she said, I'm so sorry, Roy, I told you about to do that. I really told you the wrong thing. I should have taught you the other thing, which is you don't project your anima onto a woman. Or a woman shouldn't project her animus upon a guy. You let them be who they are, and you decide from there, being real, what they are. That's why you have to give relationships a little time to blossom. You don't just jump into them. And I made that mistake, and it's been catastrophic on a personal level. How much more catastrophic is it on a national or an international level? It ends up in the murder of millions and millions of people, and we saw it all last century and in the centuries before, but nothing like last century. So, Mr. Freeman, get your head out of your ass. And you don't have to come back here if you don't want to. That's fine with me. Like I said, I'm not in this for clicks, followers, or money. And if you don't believe me, watch what I do. Poor Mike Cernovich. I know Mike's arrogant. He's an egotist. I know he is. But I'll tell you what, he pretty much says it like it is. And after everybody came down on him for his position on the Syrian deal, with Trump attacking Syria, Uh, he did. I don't think he posted on YouTube, but he did post it on. I guess it's there now, but he actually did it on Periscope, and he didn't say a word. He says, "This is what I'm saying to all of you who want me to be less than intellectually honest or criticize me for my position." And he was in a bar, I guess, and he had a cigar and he was drinking, and he didn't say a word. He just. I like Mike. He gets irritating sometimes, but that's what I'm telling you. I really don't care. Okay? I've made my peace with God. You better make yours, because this isn't going to go the way that you think it is when you worship a man. It's not going to work. You hold them to their promises. Oh, he knows things you don't know. That could be. But then you mold it so that you keep your promises. You don't bend to it. I just hope that what I think they've got on him isn't true, because if it is, it probably will destroy him. Yeah, War Angel, you say it. Okay, yeah. Trust but always verify. Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. Don't just follow blindly. So Q is being fluid, but that's not okay with you. It's different when you claim to be in the know, in the inner circle. Okay? I said early on the first Q that, yeah, some disinformation is important for a lot of reasons. But blatant, obvious, not fluidity, but intentional acts to garner a larger audience. In other words, you're trying to influence people beyond the ability of them to talk and to debate, which Q oftentimes says, we don't want people here who don't agree with us. And I'm not going to go back. I don't want to get on Q. Okay, I have my reasons, and they're all to do with the fact that it doesn't make sense that the intelligence information that they supposedly have access to, that yes, intelligence can change, but these are major snafus. If you don't know what a snafu is, go look it up. Okay? It's not just because of the fluidity of the battlefield. It's the problem with the cult, which is what I've talked about for a long time. And no, I won't put up with that. I won't. Okay. Yes, Sylvia Hertel, 18,000 Syrian children harvested organs. So you saw the Sergeant report, which really came from Eva Bartlett, I think it was, or Bartley. I'm sorry, I forget her name. Okay. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't quote David Gilmour as an authority, but I understand what you're saying. Let's see who said this. Robert USN. Oh, it's you. I remember you from before. Oh, hi. Glad you're here. Thank you. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Officers got fracked in Vietnam for violating, just various reasons. I won't even go there. But yeah, you just can't. You don't follow the cult of personality. That's a really bad thing. Fluidity, making mistakes in judgment and intelligence operations, that's all normal. But when you see evidence of a cult, that changes everything. And the way that it's done, the material that's presented, and how it's like those damn pictures. You got me on cue again. You got those dang pictures. I'll ask you people, how many of you took hours in those pictures from Hong Kong to look for Snowden? Can you imagine a bigger waste of time than a Where's Waldo on that type of thing? How many of you wasted hours with a loop or some other thing trying to find? How much time did you waste that you took away from real research or from discussions or being with your family or whatever because you're trying to find a Where's Waldo in a picture like that? Really? God. People, Russia, China, Islam won't take the USA down. Wake up. Ken Krause, never underestimate your enemy. I don't care what Steve Pachinik said. Okay? Never underestimate your enemy. The other side is bad too. You don't want to overestimate them. all right, or yourself. But don't bet on that. Don't bet on that. They already have in a lot of ways. Not so much Russia. Not so much Russia. But China and Islam, look at our situation right now. Who can you criticize? The question is, who can you criticize? That's who rules over who. Who cannot, who are you forbidden to criticize in this country right now? Certainly in Europe it's this way, but it's fast approaching that here now too. Islam and China. Russia is getting criticized all over the place. So you really think they rule over you? You really think they're going to do anything? Only if we provoke them. I'm not mad at you. I'm trying to point that out. You got to think deeper than this. You got to look at it on a far greater perspective. Don't get this tunnel vision. Okay, I've been doing this for an hour and 20 minutes. Wow, that's good. Last question, how's this mic been with the boom, the more relaxed atmosphere? And I know most of you say, well, what are you talking about? I told you, it was just going to be kind of a relaxing, enjoyable time, pretty much. Try not to get too upset or excited. So how's it been? Well, some of you let me know. Yeah, we'll talk about 5G again later. Of course, it's very bad the way they're going to use it. Not that it could be good, but they always use it as a weapon. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears on the ground. Prep, pray, stay out of the way. God bless you. God bless the Constitutional Republic of the United States and the floundering Second American Revolution. And I'll still say it. May God bless Donald Trump in his righteous endeavors. Not the others. I'm not going to pray for him in those, other than that he'll wake up and repent. God bless Donald Trump in his righteous endeavors, and may he listen to the gift of discernment, the spirit of discernment that God had given him. May he listen to it and have the courage to do the right thing. I won't say it any more than that. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for coming. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great day.